found instances of mule deer that get it, elk get it, different animals get it, but it hasn't jumped to humans. But it has jumped species to mice. And so they're really just, it's a very disturbing idea that you could eat something today, like you go hunting in the woods and you find a deer, you shoot that deer and you think, oh, I have this clean organic meat. But someday, whether it's next week or 20 years from now, it might be that you could get a brain disease, the same disease that cannibals get.
Yeah.
This neurological disease that's coming from the prions that are in this disease. By the way, they've done these sterilization processes on the tools that they use to determine whether or not they have the disease. You could take these medical instruments on a deer that has this CWD with its prions, and they can be exposed to thousands of degrees, and the prions stay alive, and for like hours, thousands of degrees for hours, and these prions are like virtually immortal.
Yeah. So this is just like what we're going through now with COVID, because that began from people eating bats and bushmeat.
Allegedly not. There's more evidence that it comes out of a lab in Wuhan that somehow or another, when they were doing these, because there's a level 4 lab in Wuhan. Brett Weinstein, who's also a biologist, was on my podcast. Mm-hmm. It was explaining, and I would butcher it if I went into detail about it, but it was explaining all the indicators that point to the fact that this was a virus that was used for research, and that they were using it to learn more about or come up with strategies to defeat coronaviruses. And that the same lab that's in Wuhan in 2018, just 2 years ago, was cited for safety violations. And
there have been cases in the past, even with bubonic plague, where research labs actually inadvertently released the plague into the local population. Yeah. My guess is, though, when this is all said and done, it's going to be from eating bushmeat in China, that people will have eaten bats, or they've eaten pangolins that got infected by bats. HIV is the same kind of thing, right? People eating chimpanzees, they're getting this infection, and then it causes a pandemic around the world. So we're seeing more and more of these diseases because we're punching into this habitat we've never been in before. People are eating the animals and getting sick from it.
Well, obviously, I don't know whether or not it came from a lab or whether it came from people eating bats. And I think ultimately it's not really the big concern. The big concern is dealing with the virus itself. But Brett seemed to be fairly convinced he couldn't say without any uncertainty, but he's fairly convinced that it came from a lab.
As you were saying this, I stumbled across this online. It seems to be related, but...
Okay, but this is Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon linked groups push study claiming China manufactured COVID. Yeah, but see, the thing is, even if China did, and this guy pushed it, you would be suspicious. You'd be like, oh, great. Now it's politicized. Again, they've politicized a fucking pandemic disease. Yeah. And now it becomes this thing about the trade war with China, or coming up with reasons why people should be suspicious of China. It's very unfortunate.
Yeah. No, it's really sad, and it stymies progress on so many fronts when things get polarized like that. It's terrible. And I think it's in our lifetime, I think it's the worst now that it's been. I mean, maybe if you went back to Vietnam War era, there was similar levels, but it's.
I don't know. I was alive then, but I wasn't paying attention. I was a little kid.
Well, we were both little kids, but I think that's probably the last time that this country has faced this kind of thing.
The crazy thing is, if you went back before Trump was president, you went back to like the last years of the Obama administration when the economy had done the turnaround from 2008 and things were looking pretty good. Yeah. Everything was nice. And even during the beginning of the Trump administration, even though people didn't like him, the economy was kicking ass. And, but there was the beginning of the polarization because there's so many people didn't like him, and the people that did like him, they're like, fuck you. It was like, they had like they had someone on their side now that they could thumb their finger up at the liberals, and then it just got worse and worse and worse. And then COVID threw gasoline on the fire, and now half the country's on fire. Yeah. I mean, it's just like when you think it couldn't get any worse. Yeah. You have record wildfires where you have the worst air quality on Earth in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah. All that being said, though, when this started and we first started getting cases in the United States, I was really concerned that society would fall apart. And I was concerned about that because I just spent 8 or 9 years reading these historical accounts of society falling apart during the bubonic plague, during yellow fever, and so on, where literally the society fell apart, and that hasn't happened.
Not totally.
Compared to past pandemics, things are pretty good.
And we have 2 months till the election.
Right.
That's my worry.
I'm worried about that too. I'm very worried about that.
The post-election world could get fucking wild.
Yeah.
It could get really wild. I'm legitimately concerned about that.
Yeah, I'm concerned about two things. I'm concerned about the erosion of democracy in this country, and I'm concerned about a violent backlash.
Yeah.
And so it is a worrisome time.
And I'm also concerned about a new disease. I mean, when you see what happened with this pandemic and you realize this is a fairly mild disease in terms of like historic context, what if something horrific like the Spanish flu or something along those lines that we don't predict coming?
Yeah, this is why we need a very vibrant federal agency that deals with this, that prepares for it.
Yeah, that's what really pissed everybody off when they found out that the pandemic response team had been sort of redistributed. Disbanded. And what else concerns you? Is there anything else that should freak people the fuck out? Because we've kind of covered it all. We've covered it all, from toxins to disease to...
Yeah, well, I think that we all want a brighter future for ourselves, for this planet, for wildlife, for nature. And it's useful to learn about the history, because you can see these mistakes. You and I have been talking about mistakes, the same mistake made over and over again, right? Of let's throw this thing out. We don't know what it does and see what happens. And an example of this is my family has a log cabin in New Hampshire that my grandfather and my father, his brother, built back in the 1940s. Awesome. Yeah, it's really cool. It's on 30 acres. And it's now an inholding, because after my grandfather bought the land and built the cabin, it became national forest. So it's this really beautiful spot. And in the 1950s, the Forest Service decided to do an experiment. So they came in and they dumped massive amounts of DDT in this river to see what would happen. And so, of course, it killed all the fish.
Oh, God.
But then they never even came back to see what happened. So to me, that's kind of a metaphor for just stupidity.
They just wanted to see?
They just, let's do an experiment. Let's
throw poison into an ecosystem.
Yeah, and let's make it so you can never fish here again. And so,
Fuck.
So, I would like to see us being careful and thoughtful. And you were talking about genetically engineered mosquitoes and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Maybe it's a great thing, right? Maybe if we genetically engineer anopheles, we can get rid of malaria and not harm mosquito populations and not harm nature. But we better figure it out before we release these things and before we try it.
The unintended consequences are what really concerns me.
Exactly. And they happen all the time.
Well, it just seems like we have an amazing amount of knowledge comparatively to people that lived thousands of years ago. But when you think about how little we know about ants communicating or various bugs and how they operate, and that we're going to fuck with mosquitoes, and we really don't know we don't know what happens if you take that piece out. Like, let's take that piece and throw it over there. What happens? Well, there's a void now, and what fills that void? And what are the domino pieces that fall into place? Do we know? I don't know. I can't imagine if we don't know how ants are so smart that we really know what the fuck happens if we kill all the mosquitoes.
Sure. And you're saying we know all this. We have this incredible knowledge. We have so much knowledge that we're just 6 months into this pandemic, and there's already 8 or 9 vaccines close to development, right? That's incredible, much faster than ever before. But are we any wiser than people were thousands of years ago? There's no evidence that we're any wiser. We know a lot more. But are we equipped to deal with these things? I mean, we made nuclear weapons during World War II. My great-grandfather was actually in charge of the chemistry division of the Manhattan Project. So he helped to make the
You got some fucking history, buddy.
Yeah. and so, we make this thing and right away we use it, right? We drop it on Japan. And now we live in this world. And when we were kids, I don't know if your school had it, but my school would have drills. We had a major Air Force base in Anchorage and Army base, and we would have these air raid drills once a week. And we had bomb shelters and all of that. And that's a pretty scary thing to grow up with. And why do we have this? Why are we just because we have something, we have to use it. It's the same with chemical weapons. So, the good thing is we have the nuclear non-proliferation treatment. We have a chemical weapons ban. We have a biological weapons ban. We have the herbicide ban. Those last three, those all happened in the 1970s, and they happened under Nixon and Ford. And so if that could be accomplished in a bipartisan way, why can't we deal with these problems we're talking about now in a bipartisan way?
I don't know if we're wiser. I suspect we are, but I suspect that the progress is incremental. And the progress, I believe I could say without a shadow of a doubt, we are wiser than Homo sapiens that lived 500,000 years ago.
Sure.
I think we are.
Our brain's a lot bigger, too.
Yeah, we are wiser. So I would assume, I think we're probably wiser than people that lived in the 1920s. I think we are. I think just based on, I know we have more information, but I think we've absorbed a lot of it, more so than we probably understand. And that if you look at the violence statistics, rape statistics, racism statistics, all the different statistics, like if you look at Pinker's work, it shows that things are getting better, even though they still suck in a lot of cases. And then it just we're a big-ass battleship, and every turn takes a long time. Yeah. I think we're wiser, but I think it's a long process to educate this dumb monkey.
Yeah.
We're dumb.
Well, we're
smart and dumb at the same time.
Yeah, I would say maybe if you go back 150 years, they were wiser than we are now because they lived in a much less polluted world. And then we got less wise, and now we're getting wiser again. You look at air pollution in the United States, and the amount of lead in the atmosphere now is less than 1% of what it was when we were kids. So the air is so much cleaner. You go back to when we were kids, 2/3 of the waterways in the United States were unsafe for swimming or fishing. Now it's about less than a third. So the water's way cleaner. And so we've cleaned up our act in this country. The pollution's getting much less. I mean, we've been talking about some of the darker side, right, of these chemicals getting in our food. But the bigger picture is actually pretty bright in this country. Pollution levels have been going down. There's more forests now in this country than there was when we were younger. The air's cleaner, the water's cleaner. And that's because we have this important environmental legislation like the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act. And that goes back to this political point because that was done in a bipartisan way. And I think we have to get back to that to solve the problems we're dealing with now.
Well, listen, your book is fantastic. This conversation was amazing. I really appreciate your time coming here, and I really enjoyed it very much. So
I really appreciate you having me. It's awesome.
My pleasure. And is there an audiobook of this?
I hope there will be. Not out yet.
Not yet?
Yeah.
Please tell me you'll read it. Will you read it?
Will I read the book?
Yeah, the audiobook.
Oh, no. I don't have a good voice. You know what I want?
But it's your word.
Yeah, no, I want a British man.
Oh, well, so like an infomercial. Like you sell it better.
Do you listen to audiobooks?
Yes.
I love audiobooks.
I do
and my
too.
favorite narrators are all men from the United Kingdom. So I'll get someone like there's this guy, John Lee, who's amazing. I would love to have him read my book.
Well, put it out there in the universe. Yeah. Maybe John Lee will hear this.
Yeah.
But it's available right now. If you're a reader, The Chemical Age, right there. Go pick it up. Thank you, Frank. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe. I really appreciate it.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you, friends, for tuning into the show. And thank you to the motherfucking Cash App. Download the Cash App from the App Store or the Google Play Store today. And when you do download the Cash App, make sure you use the referral code Joe Rogan. All one word. You will receive $10, and the Cash App will also send $10 to our good friend Justin Wren's Fight for the Forgotten charity. It's a win-win for you and for an awesome cause. Please download the Cash App today. We're also brought to you by ButcherBox. ButcherBox makes it easy for you to get premium, high-quality, humanely raised meat that you can trust. They deliver 100% grass-fed, grass-finished beef, free-range organic chicken, heritage breed pork, and wild-caught seafood directly to your door. And they're going to hook you up with ground beef for life. For a limited time, new members can get 2 pounds of free ground beef in every ButcherBox order by signing up today at butcherbox.com/Rogan. That's butcherbox.com/Rogan. Go there and get ground beef for life. We're also brought to you by Blue Moon and their fantastic beer. One of my all-time favorite beers. Oh, a beer that I legitimately drank for years before it was ever a sponsor of this podcast, and order one today, not just because it is a sponsor, but because it is delicious, and I'm just a big fan. I was really pumped when this became a sponsor. I was like, oh, I love that beer. So next time you need to